one more caveat while we're at it. Something else I've learned over the last little while, which is that I didn't realize that I came to America not realizing that I would turn out to be Rip Van Winkle. That I've been gone from this place a long, long time. And it is extraordinary to me how much I do not know about this place, even though it's the place of my birth. So, if I seem a little shoddy on my knowledge of America, you'll have to help me out. Okay, question number, I think, 7. But, I want to believe in 2 states. I'd like to believe there might be peace. I love Israel, but I have serious questions about a lot of the policies that Israel takes and about the actions and words of Israeli leaders. At the same time, I live here in the United States. Isn't it unfair for me to try to influence Israeli policy if I don't have to pay the consequences? All right, well, here's where I'm going to depart from my 1-sentence rule. Because this one demands, I think, a little deeper discussion. I completely understand the person in America who cares deeply about Israel but feels reluctant to say something about it. I'm here to tell you, though, that if you really love Israel, it's time to think differently about that kind of love and relate it to love in general. How long-term love works. Because anyone who's been in a long-term relationship with someone that they love learns that love includes criticism, just as love requires defense. It requires that you protect those you love when they need protection, and that you criticize those you love when criticism is warranted. This is really one of the more unpleasant truths of love. And that's why it's so uncomfortable to be in this situation of wondering what to do with those emotions that Israel stirs, boils up together. So, on this particular question, I'd like to linger for a minute, because I think that it really relates to a lot of the people in America who care about Israel very deeply. First of all, I want to go into that idea that you don't pay the consequences of your criticism. First of all, what's true is, and this is completely true, Israel belongs to everyone who loves it. And everyone who loves Israel is profoundly affected by what goes on there, even if they live here. The consequences already reach you. And not only because rabbis in Israel speak in your name when they make rulings. The Prime Minister of Israel, from Begin to Sharon and certainly to Netanyahu, the Prime Minister thinks of himself not only as the Prime Minister of Israel, but also as the Prime Minister of the Jewish people, because the Prime Minister of Israel is the custodian of the Jewish people's most important possession, not just the land, but the idea of Israel, which is what keeps this people going. It's what we are oriented toward no matter where we live in the world. That whole idea of you don't pay the consequences of your criticism, by the way. It's important to remember that it comes from the period of time of the prime ministership of Yitzhak Shamir. He had an aide whose name you probably have never heard, but it's Yossi ben Aaron, a fellow who we journalists got to know very well, and at the time, American Jewish audiences in various places got to know as well. And why? Because he was Yitzhak Shamir's right-hand man, and whenever Yitzhak Shamir had some kind of friction with the first Bush administration, and it happened often, and usually about settlements, way back then, he would be on the next plane to tell Americans to keep quiet and bite their tongues and leave their love for Israel right in here. And why? Because he said, if you make a mistake and you criticize wrong, the people who will pay for it will be in Israel, not you. It'll be my child and not your child, and it'll be on their heads and not yours. Which was a position that at the time I saw some validity to it until in 1992 there was an election. And Yossi ben Aaron's man Yitzhak Shamir lost to Yitzhak Rabin. And after a few months, Yitzhak Rabin moved toward making peace with the Palestinians. And when he did, who was on the next plane? Yossi ben Aaron. And what was he doing? He went to the same audiences, and what did he tell them? This government is criminal. This government is going to be responsible for the deaths of Jews. This government is committing acts of atrocity against Jewish history. In other words, you can't criticize Israel unless you agree with me. What I'm telling you is this. It is time for American Jews to take a new look at how they love Israel, and they better do it soon. I'll tell you why. There's a television program every week that people kind of watch in order to fall asleep for their Saturday afternoon nap. It's V'gosh et ha'itonaut, it's like Meet the Press or Face the Nation. It's the Israeli version of that, but it's very, very dry, and they have these guests, or the water commissioner, or the minister of something. It's just terrible, but it's great it's because Saturday afternoon is the time when you make up for lost sleep. So you turn it on and you go to sleep. However, for some reason, there were commercials on saying you better watch it this week, and they never have that. And the reason was that the guest was Thomas Friedman from the New York Times. And it was like nothing you've ever seen. In fact, I'm told that it's now hitting YouTube because it was so extraordinary. It was on Israeli television, but if you can catch it, you should. Apparently it's on the IBA website. Eventually it'll be on YouTube. But what's interesting about it is this. I'm not used to watching Thomas Friedman on TV. I read everything he writes, but I'm not used to watching him on TV. The few times that I've caught him on TV, he's this very calm, kind of distanced observer of the scene. He speaks in a considered manner, speaks with, to some extent, from on high, and he knows what he's talking about, and it's very, very it's very, very businesslike generally. Well, this was somebody else. Here's Tom Friedman. Suddenly he's kind of shaking. He looks like the bar mitzvah boy from St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Trying to shake Israeli leaders into changing their view of what's going on in their relationship with the United States Jewish community. And what he's telling them is, you're losing these people. He says, you had me at hello. At the end of the day, no matter what happens, I'll support you. But you're losing these other people. And the people that he's talking about are young people. So my wife and I were watching this, and I was getting ready to go to the airport, and she turns to me and she says, you know what's happening over there? American Jews are divesting from Israel. And of course what she was talking about was not selling their shares in Caterpillar and General Dynamics. The real divestment, and the dangerous divestment, is young people emotionally divesting from Israel. Young Jews moving away, feeling no part, feeling alienated, not having anything to do with this. As the Pesach son, the Rasha says, Ma li ulazeh. What's this have to do with me? Right? And then the question comes, what sorts of things could interest young Jews in Israel? And they have to be things that resonate with young Jews growing up. Birthright, first of all, is an important step. Birthright has its problems. I know people have criticisms of birthright. But the fact is that no matter how hard the Jewish agency and the government, despite all of their efforts, people still fall in love with Israel when they go. Despite all of the expensive and tremendously energetic efforts, despite all of the efforts to make Israel, in their view, look good, people still fall in love with Israel. Those people in the government, I guarantee you, could kill almost any emotion, but they can't kill this because Israel belongs to those young people. They just don't know it yet. If they go there, they might find out. And there are any number of ways they can get involved when they come back. And even, or maybe especially, if those kids have criticisms of Israeli policies and the way things are going, and they want to see things change, there are many things they can do here to make a difference. One of them, an important one, is for them to see that there are many, many people in Israel who are working very hard and very effectively in favor of a better future in all kinds of ways, each one in a different way. Some of them working on reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians. Others working to help redress all kinds of problems in Israeli society that make it less democratic and less the place that you want it to be. But there has to be that welcoming element in the community that says, however you hook into this, you're welcome. Because that love gets expressed differently by every single person. Because that's the way love is. From the year 2000 to the year 2009, Israel went through a decade that was the worst decade in the history of Israel, and that's saying something. Those of us who lived there lived through hell. A tremendous wave of suicide bombings in the cities, to the point where it became a natural matter to try to figure out, well, we should go to this mall instead of that mall because this mall was bombed yesterday, so maybe it has better security than the one that hasn't been bombed yet. Insane conversations that take a tremendous toll and wind up giving an entire population some form of post-traumatic stress. An entire society remaking itself. A society in which everybody lost their basic dream. Because while the people on the left were losing the dream of land for peace and the rockets that came over after Gaza, the people on the right lost their dream as well. The right is as broken as the left. There is no more greater Israel, just as there's no more land for peace. Everyone there is an ideological orphan. And after 10 years of hell, people are tired. That Time magazine article that said, why don't Israelis want peace? Well, if you read the article, first of all, you realize that the title was, a little yellow, as we say in the journalistic trade, a bit tabloidy, and let's sell magazines because the article doesn't have anything to do with this. And the article had other problems, anti-Semitism and so forth, but that's not my business. But one thing came through in that article, even so, which is this. Israelis need a rest. You cannot put people through 2 wars and waves of suicide bombing and the end of their ideological dreams and a changing of their map and not expect something to break. But if you look at the end of that decade, when presumably the right wing triumphed over everything else, you realize the right is as broken as everything else. Not only is it broken, it's not even right anymore. Because if you look at the Knesset and you examine it statistically, and you just start counting how many members of Knesset represent parties who have spoken publicly of a future solution in which the Holy Land is divided between a Palestinian state and an Israeli state, out of 120 members of Knesset, you know how many representatives come from those parties? 97. And here comes the answer for Israelis. What is the urgency? Israelis don't want the loyalty oath. Israelis, by and large, really do want a Jewish and democratic state. A state which is both authentically Jewish and authentically democratic. By a huge factor. You know, there was a poll a little while ago that asked Israelis, is there anybody on the political scene that you would describe as an extreme ultranationalist to the point of being a fascist? That's the language of the poll. 60% of the respondents, Israeli Jews, 60% of Israeli respondents said Lieberman. They don't want him in charge. They don't want a fascist in charge. They don't want a fascist Israel. They also know something else. And this is the crux of the factor, and this is the only thing that matters. And if you take away only one thing from tonight, this is the thing that it ought to be. No matter how many pieces of paper people sign saying that Israel is a Jewish and democratic state. No matter, as Tom Friedman said, if you can convince Mahmoud Abbas of the PLO to stand up and sing Hatikva in perfect Yiddish, in another 10 or 15 years, maybe if we're lucky 20, the number of Palestinians in the West Bank and Israel will exceed the number of Jews. And on that day, no matter how many loyalty oaths there are, and no matter what you ask the Palestinians to tell you about yourself, on that day, the state of Israel ceases to be a democracy, and it ceases to be a Jewish state. I was just in LA, and my family is half secular and half Chabad. And the Chabad half asked the secular half over to a barbecue, which and we love barbecues over there. It's like the Flintstones. It's a major barbecue, and of course we never talk politics, and we never even talk about never talking politics. And we all love each other. We really do. Right? And so we're talking, and everything's going fine. And one of my cousins says that for the first time in his life, and he's been trying for, I don't know, 30 years, a young fellow, 30 years to get to Israel, and something always, fouls up, and he doesn't go. But finally, he's going to have his chance. That was last week. And he's finally going to go to Israel. And what's the first thing he's going to do? He's going to spend Shabbat in Hebron to see the real Israel experience. Right? And everybody at the barbecue, half of the people at the barbecue, oh, that's great, oh, that's the best thing, oh, it's the best thing, it's exactly what you want to see in Israel, that's the only thing you need to see, that's great. And the other half is reaching for more short ribs. So that there'll be something in their mouth so they don't have to talk. Kosher, very. Anyway, the people, my cousins on that half of the room, from birth, they have someone telling them, what you're doing is what God wants. You're doing the right thing. In a cosmic sense, you're doing the only right thing. Everything you're doing is right. You're doing the right thing. God wants you to do these things. The Rebbe wants you to do these things. You're doing the right thing. Here's the rest of us. Here's the rest of us. The rest of us have nobody saying, you're doing the right thing. If you love Israel the way I spoke about before, I guarantee you, as soon as you criticize Israel, somebody will slap you down. And nobody's going to say you're doing the right thing. And if after criticizing Israel, then you defend Israel when Israel needs defense, somebody will slap you down from the other side. In fact, they'll slap you down from both sides because you're a sellout. You sold out the first people, you sold out the second. Right? So that's what I'm here to tell you. I threw out the speech that I was supposed to give this evening in America because the only thing I really have to tell you is that if you love Israel and you're willing to do something about it, and if you're willing to support Israel when it needs support, criticize Israel when it warrants criticism, you're doing the right thing.